It is getting closer to the elections, and I keep hearing the same apologists for those who might sit home this election. People who are saying that people who came out and supported this president in 2008 are not going to come out for whatever reasons given. Well, I say stop making excuses for people who fail to show up to the polls. The bottom line is this: if you care about what happens to this country, you will come out and vote. If you don't care what happens to this country, you will sit home on your ass and do nothing. So if you cared enough to vote in 2008, there's absolutely no reason to sit home in 2010. Now, if you are a progressive or a liberal, or however you want to describe yourself, there are many reasons this election to come out and vote, despite what other people have tried to say. You have healthcare reform that was passed. Republicans want to either try to defund it or try their hardest to repeal it, even though that is a mathematical impossibility. Republicans will say that most Americans disagree with the legislation. However, what they forget to mention, or purposely failed to mention, that is, that 8 to 12% of those people who polled in many of those polls say they oppose it because the bill wasn't liberal enough. So if you take the people who support the bill, along with the people who feel that the bill was not liberal enough, you end up with a majority of people in this country who reject the Republican plans for healthcare reform. I'll get to those in a later video. You have the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act that passed. If the GOP controlled Congress, do you really think that they would support legislation for equal pay for equal work? Or do you think they would have sided with the horrid Supreme Court ruling that required women to have some sort of precognition to determine if they are being discriminated against or not? Because that's what the Lilly Ledbetter versus Goodyear ruling did. Basically said that the clock started ticking on discrimination cases when the decision was made to pay them a discriminatory wage, and not each time a discriminatory wage was paid. Unlike other previous Supreme Court rulings that ruled that the act of paying a discriminatory wage was when the clock reset. But the conservative Supreme Court protected big business and basically said that the woman didn't have standing to bring a lawsuit because she would have had to known at the time what the other people were getting paid in that company and compare her wage to their wages and say, oh, I'm being discriminated against. But people don't usually know those things, and it usually is an after-the-fact point when they find out they've been discriminated against. And according to this conservative activist Supreme Court, they wouldn't have been able to, nobody would be able to sue because everybody would find out far too late that they were being discriminated against. There are further things that have been passed. Obama passed tax cuts that have showed up on everybody's paycheck. You don't see it because they're not big, but they're there. You have the Franken Amendment that restricted federal funds from going to companies who require mandatory arbitration in cases of rape where their employees are raped. Republicans voted against this, like David Vitter from Louisiana. However, the idea that a rape victim should be forced into mandatory arbitration is just absurd. Fortunately, in the case of her, she was allowed to sue anyway, despite the contract clause, but we still had the situation where government funds could go towards these companies, and that's just not right. And if the Republicans were in charge, they would protect their Republican Halliburton friends, and they would not protect the working class, the people who would get harmed. If you're not familiar with the Jamie Lee Jones case, look it up. She was basically raped and then put into a container overnight, so she couldn't go run and tell people that she was raped. It's despicable and horrific what happened to this woman, and that Republicans would protect her is sick. And if that's not enough reason for you to go out and vote against Republicans and make sure that Democrats keep their majority, I don't know what is. If you need a real reason to get out and vote, it's basically that. It's the Sharon Angles, the Christine O'Donnells, the Rand Pauls, and the David Vitters of this country that want to take it back over. Did you forget the 8 years under Bush, 6 years of which had a Republican Congress where this country went downhill? You forget that already? You have short-term memory? These people want to prevent women from aborting a pregnancy in any case. Rape, incest, life of the woman. They want to prevent these abortions from taking place. I can understand. I can have a civil debate with people who feel that life begins at conception, but, maybe there should be exceptions in those cases. But if you're a no abortion, no exception person, like some of these Republican candidates are, that's just scary. It's really scary, and you cannot let those people get into power. You can't let them get elected dog catcher. You can't let them get any foothold in this country, because they would roll back women's rights 50 years or more if they got the opportunity to. These people want to repeal the 14th Amendment and allow states to handle civil rights, like states did a really good job of handling civil rights in the past. Do you trust some of these states that we have today to handle civil rights legislation? I sure as hell don't, and I don't know why you would either, if you're supportive of civil rights, of equality for people based off of things like gender, race, sexual orientation. It's ridiculous to think that the Republicans, if they got in Congress, would be fair to any of those classifications and support civil rights based on those classifications. It's just absurd if you think that that's the case, or that you think this country would better if they got back into power. These people want to eliminate Social Security. They want to give tax cuts to corporations who ship jobs overseas. And in David Vitter's case, my senator, my serious senator, for that matter, who is leading in the polls, even though he admitted to having serious sins with hookers. His first reaction to the BP oil disaster was to seek to cap their damages that they could get. These Republicans want to protect companies that ruin people's jobs, that ruin the environment. Why would you even dream about even letting them get back into power? You should be scared to death to let these people back into power if you seeing what they support. It's just absurd, and just say, oh, I just don't feel like it. I don't feel how this is affecting me, how things have gotten better in this country. Well, things would have gotten a lot worse had we allowed people like John McCain and these Republicans to maintain control of this country. Things would have gotten much worse, and if you don't think so, you're really deluding yourself. And if you really want these Republicans drafting legislation for this country, moving us backwards instead of moving us forwards, then I guess go ahead and sit home because you don't care about what happens with this country. But if you do, if you care about what happens with this country, spread the word. Make sure that everybody who got out there and voted last time gets out and vote again, because it is vitally important that we make sure that the important gains that we have made so far in this country in the last 2 years are continued, and that we can get more gains into the future to seek to protect the rights of workers, to protect the rights of small businesses, to protect the rights of people who just want to make it by, and not have people in charge who want to say, oh, we can't extend unemployment benefits, because that just encourages people to stay unemployed. Really? Because that's the type of person you want back in office? Not me. I'm going to get out and vote, and you should too.